They say if you stand alone in a dark bathroom, light a single candle, and whisper one name 3 times into the mirror, something answers back. Some swear they saw a pale woman's face. Others remember only scratching, blood, or a scream. Most people laugh it off as just a sleepover game. But what if this game has much older, darker roots than we realize? But where this story came from, why it clings to mirrors, and how it spread from whispered folklore to a global ritual repeated by children who barely understand what they are invoking. We will travel back through centuries of superstition, royal brutality, witch hunts, and fears about womanhood and the body to ask a simple question with a deeply unsettling answer. Because Bloody Mary is not just a ghost story in the dark. She is a reflection of something we have been afraid to face for a very long time. No one can say for sure who first whispered the name Bloody Mary in front of a mirror, but the roots of the legend reach back many centuries into a very real world of fear, religion, and bloodshed. To understand how a ghost in a bathroom became so famous, we have to step away from the modern sleepover and travel deep into history, where the name Mary was already surrounded by power, death, and the supernatural. Long before children began chanting the name in the dark, Europe was filled with haunted stories and strict beliefs about the spirit world. People in the Middle Ages and early modern period lived much closer to death than most of us do today. Disease, war, childbirth, and punishment by the state were common causes of early death. Many people believed that the dead did not always rest peacefully. A violent or unjust death could create a restless spirit. A wronged woman, a murdered child, or a tortured prisoner might return as a ghost. These ideas formed the soil in which the Bloody Mary legend would eventually grow. At the same time, mirrors were not ordinary objects. For most of history, a mirror was rare and expensive. Ordinary people might never see a clear reflection of their own faces. That made reflective surfaces feel mysterious and even a little magical. Old European folklore is full of warnings about looking into mirrors for too long, especially by candlelight or after dark. Some believed a mirror could steal your soul. Others thought it was a doorway through which spirits could enter. One superstition said that if someone died in a house, the family should cover the mirrors so the spirit would not get trapped inside or drag the living into the realm of the dead. There were also older customs that used reflective surfaces for fortune-telling. In ancient Greece and Rome, and later across Europe, people sometimes used bowls of water, polished metal, or glass as tools to see visions. This practice is called scrying. The idea was simple. Stare into a reflective surface and wait until an image appears that shows the future, or a message from the other side. By the time glass mirrors became more common, this habit of looking for meaning in reflections was already well known. If you believe that a mirror can show your future or reveal a spirit, then the idea of a ghost in the mirror is not so strange. During the early modern period, there was another powerful trend that fed into the legend, a strong fear and hatred of witches. In many parts of Europe and North America, mostly between the 1500s and the 1700s, thousands of people, especially women, were accused of witchcraft. Many were tortured or executed. Villagers worried that a woman they knew might secretly be casting curses or conjuring demons. In this climate, any ritual, especially one involving the night, candles, and the unknown, could be seen as dangerous or witch-like. Stories about female spirits, blood, and magic became a way to express this fear. Now we can look at one of the most famous theories about the identity of Bloody Mary. One candidate is a real queen, Mary I of England, who ruled in the 16th century. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII and a devout Catholic. When she took the throne, England had gone through sharp religious changes. Mary tried to bring the country back to Catholicism. As part of that effort, hundreds of Protestants were burned at the stake for heresy. This brutal campaign earned her the nickname Bloody Mary from her enemies. For them, she was a queen with blood on her hands. Over time, the image of Mary I became larger than life. Protestants told stories about burned martyrs and a cruel queen. pamphlets, and later history books painted her as a symbol of religious violence and intolerance. It is not hard to see how such a figure could later be mixed into folklore. A powerful woman named Mary, associated with blood, punishment, and fire, fits perfectly into the role of a vengeful spirit. In some versions of the story, the mirror ghost is said to be the angry soul of a woman who lost her child, or who died violently. Queen Mary had a tragic false pregnancy and no heir. Real history and ghostly legend start to overlap. However, the Queen is not the only possible source. Another line of stories talks about a woman named Mary Worth or Mary Worthington. In some versions, she is described as a witch who lived in a small village in North America, perhaps in the 18th or 19th century. She was said to kidnap or harm children and use their blood in magic. The villagers, according to the tale, discovered her crimes and executed her. Before she died, she cursed those who would dare to call her name. In other versions, Mary Worth is not a witch, but a victim, a woman who was horribly disfigured or murdered. Her spirit, full of rage and pain, is said to appear to those who mock her by using the mirror ritual. It is important to say that these Mary Worth stories do not have strong historical evidence. Historians have not found clear records of a witch named Mary Worth that match the legend. This suggests that the character may be a later invention, created to give the ghost a backstory that fits local fears about witches and child harm. But even if the specific details are not factual, the pattern matters. The story always circles back to a woman called Mary, blood, injustice, and a violent end. Whether she is a queen, a witch, or a victim, she carries both guilt and suffering. There is another interesting thread that leads us closer to the sleepover game we know today. In the 18th and 19th centuries, there were folk rituals practiced by young women, especially around Halloween, that involved mirrors and candles. One common game asked a girl to walk up a staircase in the dark, holding a candle and a mirror. If she looked into the glass at the right moment, she was supposed to see the face of the man she would marry. In some versions, she might instead see a skull or a ghost, which meant she would die before marriage. These games often centered on questions about love, marriage, and death, and they used mirrors as a window into fate. Notice how similar this is to the modern Bloody Mary ritual. A young person, usually a girl, in a dark place, holding a candle, looking into a mirror, waiting for a face to appear. The earlier games promised a vision of a future husband or a warning of death. The newer game promises the appearance of Bloody Mary. The goal changed from romance to horror, but the structure stayed almost the same. This suggests that the Bloody Mary ritual may have grown out of older mirror customs that were already popular among teenage girls, just with the meaning twisted from fortune-telling to ghost summoning. By the early 20th century, urbanization, mass media, and public schools created new spaces where children and teenagers shared stories. Folklore scholars who studied playground and schoolyard culture in the 1900s found that children were constantly trading scary tales. The stories often involved bathrooms, basements, or other small private spaces where adults were not watching. A school bathroom with its mirrors, echoing tiles, and fluorescent lights was a perfect modern version of the haunted chamber or the ritual staircase. It was here, in these in-between spaces, that the Bloody Mary story began to take on its current form. In these early versions, children would dare each other to go into the bathroom, turn off the lights, and repeat a phrase in front of the mirror. Sometimes it was Bloody Mary, sometimes another name like Mary Worth, Mary Wales, or even Hail Mary. The details changed from place to place, but the basic idea was the same. Call her name a certain number of times, and she will appear. There might be other details, like spinning around, flushing a toilet, or scratching the mirror. These extra steps added drama and also helped build the feeling that something magical and dangerous was happening. We can see a clear cause and effect pattern here. Old beliefs about mirrors as spiritual gateways mixed with fears about witches and violent queens named Mary. These were then woven together with teenage mirror rituals about love and fate. and finally pushed into the setting of the modern school bathroom. At each step, the story shifted to match the worries of that time. For villagers afraid of witches, Mary was a sorceress. For Protestants in a religious struggle, Mary was a cruel queen. For teenage girls in a world of changing expectations, Mary became a ghost tied to beauty, blood, and the risk of growing up. By the time the mirror ritual settled into school bathrooms and sleepovers, it was no longer just a quiet piece of folklore. It was becoming a point of tension between two worlds, the secret world of children and teenagers and the controlling, worried world of adults. This is where the story of Bloody Mary really begins to change. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, folklorists started to notice something interesting when they visited schools and talked to kids. Again and again, in different towns and even different countries, children described a similar ritual: a dark bathroom, a mirror, a name whispered or chanted a set number of times. Then a ghostly woman appears, sometimes bloody, sometimes screaming, sometimes reaching out of the glass. Researchers realized that this was not just a random playground story. It was a structured ritual that young people were passing on to each other like a secret tradition. At the same time, parents and teachers were beginning to notice the other side of it: fear. Children refused to use certain toilets at school because they were where Bloody Mary lives. Others came home from sleepovers in tears after a failed dare in front of a mirror. The adults often had no idea what really happened, only that the kids were shaken. The more that children treated the ritual as real and dangerous, the more adults felt they needed to step in. That is where the first big conflict appears. For children, Bloody Mary was a test of courage, a thrilling secret, and a bonding experience with friends. They dared each other, screamed together, and then laughed it off, even if their hearts were still racing. For many adults, it looked like something darker. Maybe a sign that their children were getting involved with the occult, with devil worship, or at least with something psychologically harmful. This gap in understanding became the fuel that pushed the legend into the spotlight. As the 1970s and 1980s went on, the legend spread even wider. Public schools brought together kids from many neighborhoods. Families moved more often. Children carried the story from city to city and even country to country. A girl who moved from one state to another could arrive at a new school and discover that her new classmates already knew the same mirror ghost, sometimes under a slightly different name, sometimes with different rules, but clearly the same figure. During these years, a larger cultural fear was also growing in the background. In many Western countries, there was a strong wave of anxiety about the occult and satanic influence in everyday life. News programs ran stories about supposed satanic cults. Some churches warned that games like the Ouija board were dangerous tools to contact demons. In that climate, a bathroom ritual where children summoned a bloody woman in a mirror was easy to misunderstand and exaggerate. Some schools reacted by trying to ban the game outright. Teachers and principals would tell students not to say the name, not to turn off the bathroom lights, not to play any ghost games at all. But banning something often gives it even more power. For many kids, the fact that adults were scared enough to forbid Bloody Mary made her feel more real, not less. If it was only a silly story, why would the school care? This tug-of-war between fear and control sometimes led to full moral panics. In certain communities, rumors spread that a child had fainted, or had a nervous breakdown, or had been possessed after playing the game. Local papers might run short pieces hinting that something dangerous was going on in the school bathrooms. Even when there was no solid evidence, the story itself was enough to excite people's imaginations. The legend fed on the attention. Folklorists and psychologists were watching all of this with interest. Instead of seeing Bloody Mary as a literal demon, they began to ask what this ritual was doing for the children who performed it. They noticed that the main players were often preteen or young teenage girls standing at the threshold between childhood and puberty. They were dealing with new fears about their changing bodies, about blood, pain, and sexuality, at a time when adults often avoided talking clearly about any of those topics. The mirror, the darkness, the blood, and the female ghost all started to look like more than just random horror elements. From the children's point of view, the ritual was a way to push directly up against fear in a controlled setting. You choose the time. You choose the bathroom. You go in together with friends. You say the words. You might scream and run out. But that is part of the game. It is dangerous and safe at the same time. This pattern is important because it shows how the conflict is not only between kids and adults, but also inside the kids themselves. Part of them wants to believe that nothing will happen. Another part of them secretly wants something to answer from the other side of the glass. As the legend moved into the late 20th century, another force began to shape it: popular culture. Horror movies and television shows discovered that the idea of a mirror ghost with a simple summoning ritual was a perfect tool for stories. Films like Candyman, which used a similar concept of chanting a name into a mirror to call a vengeful spirit, deepened the feeling that mirrors could be gateways to something deadly. Soon, episodes of television shows and later online videos would reenact the Bloody Mary dare, sometimes treating it as a joke, sometimes as a serious paranormal experiment. Each new version added extra details. In one telling, she appears with a dead baby in her arms. In another, she scratches your face. In another, she drags you into the mirror. Even if these details were invented for drama, they slipped back into playground versions and became true within the folklore. The spread of the internet in the late 1990s and early 2000s pushed this process into overdrive. Now, a child did not need an older sibling or a local friend to teach them the ritual. They could find entire pages, videos, and message boards discussing Bloody Mary. People posted stories about their attempts, some obviously made up, others told with real fear. Urban legend websites collected different versions of the chant. Some said you had to say her name 3 times, others said 13 times, others added words like, "I believe in Bloody Mary." On one level, this made the ritual feel less secret. Adults could look it up too. On another level, it turned Bloody Mary into a global figure. A child in one country could read about how kids in another country played the same game. New cultural versions appeared, like the Japanese school bathroom ghost Hanako-san, which shares many elements with Bloody Mary, even though it comes from a different tradition. With all this attention, the emotional stakes of the story also increased. Teachers began reporting that students were too afraid to use certain bathrooms. Parents worried about their children's nightmares. In some places, schools tried to keep bathrooms better lit or limit bathroom trips during class to reduce group rituals. Meanwhile, researchers observed that the more adults tried to stamp out the game, the more kids wanted to sneak off and do it. In interviews, many people remembered their first Bloody Mary attempt as a turning point. Standing in that bathroom, staring into the mirror, they became aware of their own face in a new way. As the candle flickered or the fluorescent light hummed, their features seemed to shift. Scientists have pointed out that if you stare into a mirror under low light for long enough, your brain can start to distort the image, making you think you see another face. This simple visual trick may explain why some people swear they really saw a ghostly figure forming beside or behind them. But to the person in that moment, especially a young girl already nervous about her changing body, the effect is far from simple. The mirror shows not only her face, but a version of herself that feels strange, almost like another person. Add in the tension of a scary name and the expectation that something will happen, and the experience becomes very powerful. If she panics, screams, or runs, the story of that night becomes part of the legend in her school. If she manages to stay calm and nothing appears, she earns a kind of quiet status. She faced Bloody Mary and walked away. So the legend keeps developing through small, everyday decisions. One child suggests playing it at a birthday sleepover. Another dares a friend at recess. A teacher responds with anger, which makes it feel more serious. A local newspaper prints an article, which gives it more weight. A filmmaker uses the idea in a horror story, which sends it back into the culture with new images. The conflict is never fully resolved, because it is not only about whether the ghost is real, but about who controls the fears and fantasies of young people. In recent years, the pattern has continued, but with a new layer: online challenges. Some social media trends have encouraged kids to film themselves trying the Bloody Mary ritual and then upload their reactions. Many of these clips are clearly staged, with fake jump scares or edited ghosts. Yet even fake videos can feel real to viewers who are already primed to believe. The fear spreads not only through whispered stories at school, but through millions of screens. When people talk about Bloody Mary, they often focus on the scare, the scream, the dark bathroom, the rush of running away. But the reason this legend has survived for so long is not just because it is frightening. It is because it quietly speaks to some very deep human fears and desires, especially around growing up, the body, and the way we see ourselves. One of the strongest symbols in the Bloody Mary legend is the mirror. On the surface, it is simply a reflective surface where a ghost might appear. But in everyday life, a mirror is where we confront our own face. For a child or teenager, that can be an intense experience. The face in the mirror is changing. New lines, new shapes, acne, facial hair, makeup, all the things that signal the move from childhood to adulthood show up there. When a young girl or boy stares into a mirror in a dark room and waits for a monster to appear, they are also facing the fear that there is something strange or wrong inside themselves. Psychologists who study this legend have pointed out that the ritual often happens around the age when children start to feel more self-conscious. They worry about their looks, about whether they are attractive, normal, or acceptable. The mirror becomes a place of quiet judgment. In that sense, Bloody Mary is more than a ghost. She is a symbol of the fear that your own reflection might not match who you want to be, or that something hidden and ugly will show through if you look too closely. The blood in the legend builds on this. In many versions, Bloody Mary appears with blood on her face or dress. Sometimes she scratches the summoner's skin. In older fortune-telling versions, the mirror ritual was linked to seeing the future husband, but it could also show a skull, hinting at early death. Later, as the legend shifted toward girls at slumber parties, blood in the story began to echo another powerful change in their lives: menstruation. Many scholars have suggested that the mix of blood, pain, and a threatening female figure reflects cultural discomfort around female bodies and cycles. The ghost is female, the summoners are often female, and the bathroom is a private place where bodies are managed and controlled. Bloody Mary can be read as the fear of female blood turned into a monster. This also connects to how women are often treated in ghost stories more broadly. Across many cultures, there is a common pattern of the wronged woman ghost. She is betrayed, abused, or killed, and then returns as a frightening spirit. In some stories about Bloody Mary, she is an executed witch, a murdered woman, or a mother who lost a child. In others, she is simply an angry presence with a distorted, ruined face. These versions show another layer of meaning: the fear of female anger. Instead of letting an angry woman speak, society sometimes turns her into a monster in a story. That way, her rage can be felt but not easily understood or answered. Bloody Mary also tells us something about group behavior and social pressure. The ritual almost always happens with more than one person. Even if one person stands in front of the mirror, others are typically waiting just outside the door. They push, they tease, they whisper. No one wants to be the coward who backs out. At the same time, no one wants to be the one who totally loses control and breaks down in panic. The game is a way of exploring where each person stands between fear and bravery. Folklore experts who have interviewed children about these games found that many remembered the experience not just as scary, but as strangely important. They had a story to tell afterward, something that set them apart. Even if they were terrified in the moment, they gained a kind of status by facing the dare. In that sense, Bloody Mary functions almost like a small rite of passage. It is not formal like a religious ceremony, but it works in a similar way. You go through fear in order to come out different on the other side, with a new understanding of yourself and your place in the group. The cultural impact of Bloody Mary spreads far beyond bathrooms and playgrounds. She has become a recognizable horror figure, showing up in movies, television, books, and video games. Writers and directors use her because the idea is instantly familiar. They can play with the rules, change her appearance, or give her a detailed backstory, but the core image remains the same: a mirror, a name, a ghost. Every time a new piece of media uses this pattern, it sends the legend back into the real world with new energy. Children who watch or hear about these stories bring fresh details into their own playground versions. Popular culture and folklore feed each other in a cycle. When we look beyond the Western world, we find that the Bloody Mary legend is not unique, even though her specific name and shape are local. Many cultures have their own bathroom or school ghosts that children summon as tests of courage. A famous example is the Japanese legend of Hanako-san, a young girl's ghost said to haunt school toilets. To call her, children knock on the stall door and ask if she is there. Like Bloody Mary, she is tied to a private, everyday space that children must use. And like Bloody Mary, she often reflects current fears, such as war, bullying, or violence against children. The similarities between Bloody Mary and figures like Hanako-san show that certain patterns repeat across cultures. Children everywhere share some of the same experiences: school, bathrooms, hidden corners where adults are not constantly watching, and the need to prove bravery to peers. Bathrooms are especially interesting symbols. They are places of vulnerability where we lock doors, undress, and deal with private bodily functions. Turning that space into a haunted zone allows children to express fears that are hard to put into words. The ghost becomes a kind of guardian of the private world, both frightening and familiar. Another layer of meaning lies in the idea of summoning itself. To call Bloody Mary, you must follow instructions, say the right words, and perform the ritual exactly. This gives children a sense of control over something frightening. Instead of being randomly attacked by a ghost, they choose when and how to meet her. Folklore scholars have noted that this controlled danger can help young people feel more powerful in a world where many things are decided by adults. In a small, secret way, they become the ones in charge of the supernatural. At the same time, the legend raises questions about how fear spreads and how it can shape behavior. Many adults remember being truly afraid of mirrors in the dark long after they stopped believing in the ghost. Some avoided looking at their reflection at night, or kept lights on, or rushed past certain rooms. A story that starts as a game can change habits and feelings for years. This shows the power of repeated images and shared narratives. When many people tell the same story, it can start to feel larger than life, almost like a living thing. In schools, the impact of the Bloody Mary legend has sometimes forced adults to think more carefully about children's emotional lives. When teachers see students refusing to use certain bathrooms, they have to decide how to respond. Some simply forbid the game, which may or may not reduce the fear. Others try to talk with the students about why they are scared, opening space for discussions about anxiety, group pressure, and the difference between stories and reality. In that way, Bloody Mary occasionally pushes adults into uncomfortable but necessary conversations with children. There is also a psychological side to this legend that touches on how the human brain works. Experiments in perception have shown that staring at your reflection in low light for an extended time can cause your mind to distort the image. People start to see their faces melt, shift, or change into something else. This effect, sometimes called the strange face illusion, does not require any ghost at all. It is simply a trick of the brain trying to make sense of weak visual information. Yet when it happens to someone who has just chanted the name of a vengeful spirit, it feels like proof that the legend is real. Here, science and folklore intersect. The mind's natural quirks support the story, and the story shapes how people interpret what they see. In a larger cultural sense, Bloody Mary invites us to think about the stories we use to talk about fear, especially fear connected to women and girls. She is not a powerful king or a distant demon. She is usually imagined as a woman in pain, marked by blood, trapped in a mirror or a bathroom, waiting to be called. That image can be read as a reflection of how society often treats women's suffering. Hidden, pushed into private spaces, turned into something eerie rather than faced directly. When children summon her, they are not only looking for a scare, they are also, in a quiet way, reaching out to that hidden figure and asking her to show herself. So what does the legend of Bloody Mary really mean for us today? On one level, it remains a simple ghost story, a thrill passed from one generation of children to the next. On another level, it is a mirror in which we can see our own anxieties about growing up, about bodies, about gender, and about the line between belief and doubt. The fact that similar legends appear all over the world suggests that these anxieties are not limited to one place or time. They are part of what it means to be human. In the end, the dark bathroom and the whispered name are not only about a spirit on the other side of the glass. They are about us, standing there, trying to decide whether we are really alone, what we truly believe, and how much of our own reflection we are ready to face.